Born in the early hours of October 25, 1900, Frances Abigail Olufunmilayo Thomas was an iconic woman with an air of authority and the look of someone whose decision was final. She was first in almost everything that matters. On the 18th of February 1977, Anikulapo-Kuti, as she was later called, found herself in confrontation with about 1,000 armed soldiers who stormed the Kalakuta Republic of her son and shoved her off the window of a storey building. She died a little over a year later as a result of her injuries. So, let's dive into the story of this iconic lioness of Lisabi. Welcome to this edition of Hispu Media. Gabriel here. Frances Abigail Olufunmilayo Thomas was born at around 2:55 a.m. on the 25th of October 1900 in Abeokuta, the then southern Nigerian protectorate of the British Empire. Her parents, Chief Daniel Olufunmilayo Thomas and Lucretia Phyllis Omoyeni Adiosholu, were not wealthy, but were comfortable and respected in both the African and European communities. Her father farmed and traded palm produce while her mother worked as a dressmaker. Her parents married in 1897 and they had 2 children who died at infancy before Frances was born. Although it was not common for Nigerian families to invest in much education for girls at the time, Frances' parents believed in the importance of education for both boys and girls. Their 2 girls were sent to the infant mission school at Kemta and then to primary school at St. John's, Igbein. By the way guys, to help us reach more people, kindly take a moment to book the like button on this video and subscribe to Hispu Media. Thank you. After her primary education, Funmilayo's parents discussed the possibility of sending her to Lagos or to Annie Walsh Girls Grammar School in Sierra Leone to continue her education. As a local secondary school, the Abeokuta Grammar School, AGS, was all male. However, in 1914, she was one of 6 girls admitted to Abeokuta Grammar School for her secondary education. Coincidentally, just like her future husband, Frances was first among the 6 girls registered for study at that year. Because of her academic excellence, she was appointed to teach other young students from 1917 to 1919 while receiving her own lessons from Coups. Nonetheless, in 1919, with the help of family and friends, Funmilayo moved to England to continue her education. While in England, she attended Wisham Hall School for Girls in Cheshire, where she learned elocution, music, dressmaking, French, and various domestic skills. It was while in Britain that she decided to drop her Christian name, Frances, in favor of her Yoruba name, Funmilayo, likely in response to a possible experience of racism in England. In September 1922, Funmilayo returned to Abeokuta to continue her role as a teacher. She was named the head teacher of the girls' branch of the Abeokuta Grammar School in 1923. She taught algebra, drawing, English, geometry, and Latin. On the 20th of January 1925, Funmilayo married Reverend Israel Oludotun Ransome-Kuti, a member of the Ransome-Kuti family. Israel had studied at the Abeokuta Grammar School several years ahead of Funmilayo, and while she was still in school, the two had developed a friendship followed by courtship. Israel found work as a school principal and was strongly involved in bringing people together and overcoming ethnic and regional divisions. He later became a co-founder of both the Nigerian Union of Teachers and the Nigerian Union of Students. His marriage to Funmilayo would last for 30 years until Israel's death and was marked by a sense of equality and deep mutual respect between the couple. After marriage, Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti had quit her job as a teacher, but she would soon found other projects. But we will come back to that shortly. In 1928, she established one of the first preschool classes in Nigeria, known as Mrs. Kuti's Kindergarten class. Around the same time, she started a club for young women of elite families to encourage their self-improvement while also organizing classes for illiterate women. Ransome-Kuti was the first woman in Abeokuta to drive a car. They had made arrangements to buy a second-hand car from England between 1935 and 1936. Much later, she began projects that would later define her entire existence. In 1932, Ransome-Kuti had helped in establishing the Abeokuta Ladies Club. The club focused on charity work, sewing, catering, and adult education, and its early members were mostly Christian Western-educated women from the middle class. By the 1940s, however, the club was moving in a more political direction, and inspired by an illiterate friend, Ransome-Kuti started using the club to organize literacy workshops for market women. She would subsequently gain from this experience greater understanding of the social and political inequalities faced by many women in Nigeria. In 1944, she developed a successful campaign to stop local authorities seizing rice from market women under false pretense. By 1946, the club was formally renamed the Abeokuta Women's Union (AWU) and was now open to all women in Abeokuta. Ransome-Kuti became the president of the AWU. The organization now turned its focus to fighting unfair price control and taxes imposed on market women. She was likened to the warrior Lisabi. Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti's first well-known political activity came when she led the AWU in a protest against tax imposed on women. In Abeokuta, alongside regular taxes for income and water usage, market women were also forced to pay a special tax that went directly to market supervisors, or what they call parakoyis. Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti and the Abeokuta Women's Union (AWU) are credited with being the primary force behind the abdication of the traditional ruler of Igbaland, Alake Ademola II, in January 1949. The women's role in the Alake's abdication has become not only a matter of history but of legend. Though other organized groups within the Abeokuta-based Igbaland, such as the Majioborg and the Ogboni societies, eventually rallied to the cause, the women were the most visible in the struggle. They were also the most venerated in the press and among the people. After the Alake's abdication, Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti was compared to the historical Lisabi, a legendary hero of the Igba who fought for the liberation of Igba people in the 17th century. The process leading to the Alake's abdication catapulted Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti into the limelight and set her on the course of being recognized as a spokesperson for the women of Nigeria. Since she already possessed charisma and feminist convictions, the event gave her sufficient renown to embark on organizing women locally and attracted international attention as well. But that is not all. In 1947, the National Council of Nigeria and the Cameroon's NCNC sent a delegation to London to protest the proposed Nigerian constitution. Ransome-Kuti was the only woman in the delegation. While in London, Ransome-Kuti gave speeches about issues affecting Nigerian women at the London Women's Parliamentary Committee, the National Federation of Women's Institute, and other organizations. She also caused a stir after writing an article for the Daily Worker that argued that colonial rule had severely marginalized Nigerian women both politically and economically. In 1949, Ransome-Kuti actively represented Abeokuta in the Western Province Conference to discuss the new national constitution. She was an active voice against women disenfranchisement and the creation of indirect electoral system. In May 1949, Ransome-Kuti proposed the creation of the Nigerian Women's Union (NWU) in order to better support women's rights and enfranchisement across the country. She later served as the president of the new women's organization. Ransome-Kuti was a founding member of the NCNC, and in 1951 she ran as an NCNC candidate for the Regional Assembly, but the bid was not successful. She went on to hold key positions in the women wing of the party. In 1953, Ransome-Kuti organized a conference in Abeokuta to discuss women's suffrage and political representation in Nigeria. The two-day event was said to be attended by up to 400 women delegates. The participants subsequently formed the Federation of Nigerian Women's Society, the FNWS. The FNWS campaigned for women's political inclusion, improved educational opportunities, and the creation of new social services and healthcare. During the early 1950s, Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti was appointed to the Western House of Chiefs and granted a chieftaincy title of the Oloye of the Yoruba people. She was the first woman appointed to the Western House and one of the few women to have a position in any Nigerian House of Chiefs at the time. She also served as a board member for the Nigerian Union of Teachers. But he would subsequently face some problems at the international level. We will come back to that shortly. But on the 6th of April 1955, her husband Israel Ransome-Kuti died from prostate cancer after an extended period of illness. Funmilayo was hit hard by the loss of her husband, having struggled over the past several years with the question of whether to abandon her political work in order to spend time with the husband. Over the next 2 decades, along her political activities, she started investing time and money to establish new schools throughout Abeokuta. On the continent, also, she developed strong ties with Egyptian, Algerian and Ghanaian women organizations, and also embarked on trips to England, China, the Soviet Union, Switzerland, Austria, Czechoslovakia, and Poland. But for fear of spreading communist ideologies and her many communist connections, Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti was denied American visa in 1958. Despite her letters of protest, the passport was not renewed until Nigeria gained independence in 1960. During the 1959 election, Ransome-Kuti attempted to secure the ticket of the NCNC but was denied. She went ahead to run as an independent candidate instead. She did not win the bid, but her campaign split the vote and helped an opponent of the NCNC to win the seat. Consequently, her membership of the NCNC was revoked. But she went on to establish a political party of her own, the Commoners People's Party, but the party failed to gain momentum and was dissolved after 1 year. Ransome-Kuti received the national honor of membership in the Order of the Niger in 1965 and the Lenin Peace Prize in 1970. The University of Ibadan also bestowed on her an honorary doctorate of law in 1968. In the early 1970s, Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti formally changed her name to Anikulapo-Kuti, discarding the European name Ransom. But death will come to her less than a decade later. To understand how Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti died, we need to first look at the genesis of the crisis that led to her demise. In the later years of Anikulapo-Kuti's life, her son Fela, a musician and activist, became known for his vocal criticism of the Nigerian military regime. Fela had been arrested and briefly imprisoned during the early 1970s, and the authorities had raided his home and properties several times. To show his disdain for the Nigerian authority, he named his home property the Kalakuta Republic. He also transformed his home into a commune where friends and supporters could gather and spend time without fear of the military authorities. In November 1974, Nigerian police raided his nightclub in town with axes and tear gas, leaving Fela with injuries. But he was not deterred and continued to confront the excesses of the military regime. In 1976, Fela released an album called Zombie, in which he compared the army to mindless machines. To many observers and players, This album acted as a final straw in the conflict between Fela and the government. Anikulapo-Kuti often visited her son at his compound, and she was there on the 18th of February 1977 when about 1,000 armed soldiers surrounded and stormed the property. As soon as the soldiers broke inside, they began destroying property and assaulting the residents. Fela and Abeokuta were beaten and severely injured. Anikulapo-Kuti, Fela's mother, was said to have been shoved off a window of a story building. Following the attack, she was hospitalized and eventually lapsed into a coma. She died on the 13th of April 1978 as a result of her injuries. However, in a 2014 report on the couple, O.O. Davids, the then General Service Officer in the Nigerian Army, disputed the claim that she was thrown from an upstairs. He said, quote, "He just wanted to whip up sentiments and use it to win the case against the government. If she was thrown, she would have died on the spot. Mama was old. I wasn't there, but my fellow soldiers gave me a lowdown of the incident," he concluded. Anikulapo-Kuti's remains were interred in Abeokuta in the same vault as her husband. On the one-year anniversary of his mother's death, Fela took a coffin to the gate of Dodan Barracks and left it there in order to shame the government. But her life was an inspiration to many. Activist Hajia Gambo, politician Margaret Ekpo, and feminist writer Amina Mama have cited Ransome-Kuti's activism as having influenced their work. Click here for the story of the assassination of Kudirat Abiola, an iconic woman who gave her life in the struggle for the liberation of Nigeria. For more interesting stories like this, don't forget to like this one so that YouTube can show it to more people. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you very much for watching. Peace.